Good evening and welcome to Alan's Italy. Many people have told me that they love that beginning part with all those wonderful pictures, and so we decided tonight to play that twice for you. So you saw that, and then we did it all over again. And the more compliments we get, the more times we'll do it at the beginning of the show. Before we go any further, I'd like to introduce the gentleman sitting next to me, but no introductions are necessary because you know him by now very well. Ric Hirst. Ric, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
And as you could tell by the fact that Ric is here, tonight will be a show which will focus on analysis of art, because Ric is my guide through many of these wonderful pieces of art, sculpture, and paintings. So Ric will be doing that with me, and we're going to start in a few minutes. As a matter of fact, I could show you this. We could get this set up first. So let me do this. So this is tonight's show. It's going to be about a place called the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, which we'll explain in just a few minutes. But I want to just take a moment because I want to explain that next Friday night, which is the 28th of September, we are going to deviate from our normal mode of showing things related to Italy in favor of a show that came about a few months ago, actually, because while I'm in the middle of writing a couple of books, and one of the things I was doing was trying to look up some of the history of the Woodstock Public Access Station, and I've been doing a lot of research on that, and I came across two people who've been very helpful to me. And a lot of people in the Woodstock area know these people because they are residents of the nearby area, of the surrounding area. One of them is Toby Carey, and the other one is Bart Friedman. So these two gentlemen will be on my show next Friday night, and we will spend most of that show talking about the origins of Woodstock Public Access going back to the 1970s. So we have some very interesting stuff to show you, and they have a wealth of information related to things they did during those very early times. So it won't be Italy. There is actually a little bit of Italy involved in that show, but I'm going to keep that in suspense until we do that next Friday night. But most of the show will be focused on how they got started getting all of this organized. So let's talk about the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo. See, now I have to be careful of my Italian because Ric knows Italian much better than I do, and he's going to probably be correct, although he's too gracious for that, but correcting my Italian. The Museo dell'Opera, let me go back. There are many museums in Florence. A person could spend a lifetime simply going from museum to museum. And most people who come to Florence, tourists go to the Uffizi, and they go to the Accademia, and they go to the Bargello, and they go to the Cathedral. But there are many museums in Florence that are unheralded, untouristy, and yet are really wonderful museums. And one of them is this museum. It's the Museum of the Works of the Duomo. And would you like to begin talking a little about the museum itself?
Yes, actually, the museum is a is a wonderful and special place because, as Alan said, very few people know about the museum and walk through it, so that there are no crowds, and it actually contains almost a history of the art from the High Middle Ages to the 19th century. So it's a unique place to see a very high concentration of the art produced solely in Florence for the Florentine Cathedral.
Okay,
so
let's go back
Sure.
to the beginning, and this is
Well, this is a map of Florence. Florence is a wonderful place to walk around because many areas of the old city are very accessible. The architecture itself is wonderful, reflective of a very powerful medieval and Renaissance republic. And it has its origins as a Roman castrum.
Good.
You can actually see that because this area that I'm pointing to here was the Roman castrum, just these four sides. And you can see that the original Roman streets have been pretty much reflected in the modern streets. And this right here is the old Roman Forum. Up in the corner here were the walls, and the churches that were built in this area were built from around 400 AD on. And they were all concentrated right up here in the northeast corner. So that's the area that we're going to talk about today. We're going to be talking about the Baptistery, the Baptistery, the Duomo or the Cathedral, and the Campanille. All of those relics from the building of the cathedral and of the Campanile especially are in the Opera del Duomo, which is right here, right off the apse of the cathedral, right across the street.
Okay. And
These are the buildings of the cathedral, that are shown in the Duomo. Here's the baptistry. It's an octagonal structure. It's the oldest structure of the three of the complexes. This is the Duomo, the Basilica di Santa Santa Maria del Fiore, and this is Giotto's Campanile.
okay, and the museum that we were referring to is around here.
As a
We
matter of
actually-
fact, it's right there.
Right, exactly. So, the day that we went around Florence, we went to the photography museum. This is a great thing. If you're in Florence, the first thing you do is you go to the photography museum.
Right.
Then you have lunch. We had lunch right off the dome. Remember that spot?
Yeah.
And then we walked around here, and that orange building over there is that building right there. Okay, so that's the museum. And would you like to, I could make this bigger.
Sure, that would be
Yeah,
great.
sure.
Okay. The idea for the cathedral started on the plan of an original church. Santa Reparata, which is shown in red, was an original church built during late imperial times, or begun in late imperial times in Rome, of the Roman Republic. So the church itself was about 900 years old by the time it was decided that it was in such disrepair that they wanted to build a new cathedral. And in about 1294, the major guilds in Florence got together to discuss plans for a new cathedral, primarily because they were now a powerful, highly influential republic in central Italy that rivaled many of the original communes, like Pisa, which was already in the process of building its great cathedral. So the major guilds got together and decided to have a competition for the new cathedral. And in 1294, Arnolfo da Cambio became the master of the works because he designed a new cathedral, which you can see in orange. It's much bigger. It had much larger side chapels and apse. And it was a straight basilica plan, which means that it had a nave, it had two aisles, here and here, and an apse. And of course, the side chapels that were very important for baptisms and other religious services. This particular cathedral, as I say, was organized by the guilds. They decided that it could be financed by the taxation of the population, The population seems to have agreed at that time. And what they formed was the Opera del Duomo, which means it was the work of the Duomo. It's the organization, the magistrature, that still exists today, a 700-year-old institution that manages, built, supervises, and repairs the cathedral. So it's still in operation after 700 years. One of the few organizations that still is in existence in northern Italy, north and central Italy, after all these years.
Now, according to this, and this is something I never knew, so this is a learning experience for me as well. This was not the cathedral that Di Cambio created or
Yes.
planned
Yeah.
was not what it turned out to be.
No,
What happened?
because
Because then it got much bigger. I see
right
here.
in 1334, they decided to increase the size of the cathedral, and the Francesco Talenti was the person chosen to increase the size. So the nave is longer, the apse was bigger, and also the side chapels were made bigger, partly to accommodate a growth in the population of Florence. And at the time, throngs of people would be visiting the cathedral every day. They also had additional altars for private services that were going to be around the aisles on either side of the nave.
Fascinating. Okay. Shall I move on? Sure. Okay, so that's
So this is the current museum. It's actually a museum only since 1891. Before that, as I say, the cornerstone for the cathedral was laid in 1296. It took 100 years for them to decide to have actually their own residences for the people who would administer the day-to-day activities. So what they asked Brunelleschi to design for them a building that would house the Provisore, who is sort of like the general director for the guilds.
Brunelleschi designed this one?
Actually, no. What you see here is not Brunelleschi's final design, because over the years, Brunelleschi's design was added to and changed radically when it became a museum.
I see.
So, in addition, several houses were added to either side of it to form one continuous whole. And it was redesigned in the 19th century, late 19th century, to conform to the style of the Renaissance architecture from that period.
Okay.
But originally from roughly 1400, they bought up a small orchard and farmhouse. And there they established the workshops for the cathedral, primarily the masons. Behind them were furnaces eventually owned and run by Ghiberti, the fellow who did two of the doors of the Baptistery. So today, it still is an administrative center for the upkeep of the cathedral, and it still does have a workshop in the Via del Studio 23, which is, it's a tremendous place. They're continually working on pieces that have worn out from the facade of the cathedral, so that you can still see masons and sculptors working continuously. So now it contains mostly museum pieces from all of the periods of the Baptistery onward.
Okay. That's as good a background of that museum as I've ever heard.
Okay.
Go, baby.
Arnolfo di Cambio not only designed the general layout for the cathedral, but he also designed the facade, the first facade. And these are fragments of the first facade. In 1430, way after Arnolfo died, the facade was being rebuilt. And while it was being rebuilt, they restored some of the statues that were there. Primarily, this is the group that was over the main door of the cathedral, the center door. And you can see that in that period of time, you still had the high Gothic influence. Mm-hmm. You did not have a Renaissance understanding of form or anatomy. Most of the time, the sculptures were still rather schematic or symbolic in their appearance, as in the Byzantine. But you can see there's a certain volume to the figures. And that comes from Arnolfo's study of Giotto's paintings. Giotto had this tremendous influence on making people no longer thin and sway back, but making them seem like people with a presence. A good deal of the rest of the statue, the drapery, the Christ child, for example, is still very stiff and it's not exactly realistic or natural in any way. But this is a great step forward from the original high Gothic mannerisms. Mm-hmm. The Madonna has an unusual feature. She has glass eyes. And that was in order to capture the sunlight when you originally see the statue.
I see. Is this a phone call? Usually when the phone rings, it means it's a phone call. Let me see what this is. Hello, welcome to Alan's Italy.
Hello, Alan, this is Rich. How you doing?
Rich, how you doing? You want to speak to Ellen, no doubt.
Yes, I'm sorry. You on the air?
We're on the air, yeah.
I'm sorry.
You have any Italy questions? We'd be happy to answer it.
Who was the fifth Pope of Rome?
Who was the fifth Pope of Rome? Boy, I don't know if
me.
we know that. I don't think we know that. We could tell you the first, the second. Here's Ellen. We got to move on.
Okay.
We're very informal here, you know. Anybody who feels like calling and shooting the breeze. I'm moving
Hi, I
on.
didn't realize you were on the
Yeah,
air.
okay.
Sure. Actually, if you just move back for a moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi.
On either
this is
side
right now.
are also statues by Arnolfo di Cambio, and they're Saint
Okay.
Reparata,
Everything
who
go
is
good?
the first saint of the first church, and on the other side is Bishop Zenobius,
I'll
who
be
was
home
the
by
first
7.
bishop
That
of
wasn't going to take as long as I thought it was.
of Santa Reparata. Before it was Santa Reparata, it was an old church, and he lived around 350 A.D. So this shows their consciousness of trying to bring all of the elements of early and late
history.
Religious history together.
Very interesting.
And now we move on. As I said, this museum shows tremendous changes in the sculpture of the time. Mm-hmm. These were done by Nino and Andrea Pisano, who were some of the greatest sculptors of their time, both in Lucca and in Pisa, and many other places around central Italy. On the left-hand side is another sculpture of Santa Reparata, but you'll see in this case it's highly balanced. There's a more naturalistic feel to the body, and you can see the gradual development of a naturalistic representation going from the Byzantine, now moving through the pre-Renaissance. On the right is also, probably by Nino Pisano, and it shows Christ the Redeemer. These are also from the facade of the cathedral.
Right. Okay.
This group actually is from the Baptistery. It's by Tino di Camino around 1300, and it represents faith, hope, and charity. These fragments were taken down when the baptistry was redecorated on the outside in the 1500s by Vincenzo Danti and Andrea Sansovino. So these were originals. These are original beautiful pieces of sculpture, most of which have been dispersed to other places, other private owners or other institutions. The faith is the statue, the head on the left. Charity holds the cornucopia, which is that one on the right, and hope has the crown. So these are done, interestingly enough, these may have been painted at some time, because when you look at them closely, they're actually finished from the chisel. They're not smooth. They all have facets all over them.
Okay, moving along.
Oh, this is another one done by Tino Di Camino. You'll notice that in pre-Renaissance sculpture, they wanted to show suffering, but the way in which they showed suffering was by schematic versions of the anatomy. So the chest doesn't really look like that. The ribs don't really look like that. The hands one is small, which you can't see, and one is very large to show benediction. But they're all indicated to show suffering. Later on, during the Renaissance, they were able to show suffering also through facial representation, which we'll get to.
Okay.
So this was part of Arnolfo's decoration for the rest of the facade, and parts of this are from the baptistry. This is called Cosmati, and it was Cosmati work. It was invented around 1200 by Riccardo Cosmati near Rome, and he was a Byzantine inlay specialist, but this is special because he used marble pieces and colored glass tiles to enhance the reflectivity of the cathedral in the sun. And Arnolfo, who had lived and worked in Rome and in Naples, took this aspect of Roman architecture to enhance the cathedral in Florence. So these are wonderful panels. You can imagine that they would be sparkling in the sun during the summer days.
Are they mosaics?
They're not mosaics. These are inlays. So that means that there's a solid matrix of marble.
I see.
And they've cut out holes, which are the exact same size of the pieces that they've put into those spots. So they still exist. And this is really a brilliant example of it, which includes the Lamb of God, the Agnus Dei. It's from the Baptistry, and it's a beautiful piece. And here we see examples of moving directly into the Renaissance. You can tell already that these sculptures are very, very different from pre-Renaissance styles or from the High Gothic. They're more natural. They're very flowing. On the other hand, these were done for niches around the side doors in the original facade. The one on the right is by Ciuffragni, and this was it's Saint Matthew, I believe. And this particular sculpture still has some of the stiffness in the drapery and still has some of the non-expressiveness of sort of a schematic face.
So around what year was this?
1408.
So it's early, very, very, very early in the 15th century.
That's correct, and it's an example of sort of the transition, because the two other sculptures, the one on the left, made by Nani de Banco, was also in 1410, and the Donatello's Saint John was finished
I was just
in
about to ask.
1415. So you can see that roughly
so
at this.
we're getting very close to Donatello at this point.
Well, Donatello, yes. As a matter of fact, you can see that different styles were still in play around the beginning of the Renaissance. So you still had a lot of high Gothic. There's another statue by Lamberti, which we didn't capture, but it really does show the existence of the high Gothic. But you can see that Nani de Banco's sculpture, the one on the left, shows a degree of expressiveness in the face, a degree of expressiveness in the hands. He sort of has this calm look on his face, whereas the Saint John the Evangelist by Donatello in the center has got this fierce expression, while you can see his shoulders are slumped in a natural position. The hands are in a natural position. And the drapery is meant to point back up to the face, to make as if it were a circle.
I see. Okay.
And this is one of the two cantoria that was originally put into the cathedral.
Which is?
These, the cantoria are the singing galleries that were
Choir lofts.
choir lofts, that were put over the sacristies in the Florence Cathedral.
Sacristies are?
The
chapels?
the side chapels.
The side chapels, yes.
Right. And actually, these were supposed to be put underneath the organ, which eventually arrived.
So in other words, the people went up there somehow.
Right.
I guess a ladder, and they stood there.
Correct.
While they
Sang.
participated in the choir. Right.
Correct.
Okay.
This one happens to be by Donatello, and it's a little later than his Saint John, and it shows these little putti running wildly across the front panels. It's sort of his interpretation as make a praise the Lord with a great noise. The interesting part is it looks as if they're running continuously behind a loggia, but he's done that in order to hide the separate panels of which the side wall was made.
I see.
Now, his was in a low light, so when you take a look at the original in the Duomo, works of the Duomo, what you'll see is it has highly reflective glass tiles all around it, because this one sacristy was in shadow permanently. So any light that had to be seen had to be picked up and reflected by the glass inlay
I see.
that was put into the background.
What are the purpose of those two holes in the bottom?
I have no idea, but at
Just decoration, you think?
they were decoration,
Yeah.
and in all likelihood, they contained bronze sculptures. Now, on the other hand, this is the Cathedral by Luca della Robbia, made at virtually the same time, and for the same reason. It was the other cantoria underneath the organ. But this one is very decorous. It shows the same subject, but with a sweetness and classicism that Donatello never matched. Donatello was an experimental artist. Luca della Robbia was a person who appealed to the sensibilities of those who were paying for the cathedral. And as you can see, these are 8 separate panels, that represent the different parts of the liturgy. If you go to the next one,
Okay,
okay,
that's one of them.
that's one of the panels. This is one of the original panels. And you'll see that it's a highly organized, very beautifully composed, classical representation. He was very familiar with the Roman artwork, Greco-Roman artwork. He was very familiar with sarcophagi and statues that still existed in fragments around the city of Florence, incorporated into many walls. And you can see that he's also highly composed this, as opposed to a lot of the pre-Renaissance designs. A lot of these designs you see are pointing toward the center. This
Yes, uh-huh.
figure is curved,
Mm-hmm.
this figure is curved, and this figure is curved the other way, and this figure is curved, and it all points toward a center, which is a drum. So it leads your eye toward the center so that you're not deviating. You can also concentrate on each separate panel this way. You notice all the limbs seem naturalistic. They, of course, are idealized, but everything is done in order to enhance your delight in these, more than just looking at individual sculptures as schematic. These are supposed to give you a sense of life.
Now, may I ask, what now these were in the cathedral and are now not in the cathedral?
Correct.
And is that just simply to preserve them?
They're
Or
not
was
in
there
the
another
cathedral.
reason?
They were taken down from the cathedral, and there was a new choir put in during the time of Frederick the First, the Duke of Medici.
For what
Duke
purpose?
Of Florence.
For what purpose?
Because they felt that it was not grand enough. And as a matter of fact, a good chunk of the changes that occurred to the cathedral under Frederick the First, Francesco the First, was due to the fact that they wanted it fancier and more in the modern style. That is to say, Baroque style.
I see. Okay.
The works of the Duomo also contain many paintings, vestments, reliquaries, church furniture that was considered old-fashioned by the time the Renaissance became the fashionable modern artwork of the 15th century. These were always over private wooden altars that bordered the sides of the church. And it was decided to remove the altars because they were ugly, and to remove the panels because they were old-fashioned. Many of them were dispersed, many destroyed, and this is just one of the examples. It's of Saint Sebastian. You can see pierced by many arrows.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And his image was always invoked, among others, during the time of plague. So it was invoked during the 1348 plague, and then the plague of 1374. So this was put up in remembrance and was an altarpiece over a wooden altar.
Okay.
You'll also see that it contains lots of wooden furniture. In the background, by the way, are the panels done for the new choir after the old choir lofts were removed, the old cantoria. But this shows a lectern that contained music books, that could hold music books, that had huge images, so that those in the choir could see the musical notation.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Huh. I had no idea what that was when I first looked at it. I was like,
Right.
what is that?
Yeah. So that's why it has these.
I thought it was a model for the lantern or something.
No.
No?
No. That's. So you can see that they've preserved many things that they could preserve. They couldn't. They
Right.
didn't preserve everything.
Okay.
This is a picture of the Campanile.
Let's make it larger, as
Okay.
large as we possibly can.
Um,
Wait a minute. Okay. Okay, that's it. That's all we can do.
okay. Um, in 1302, Arnolfo di Cambio, the original designer and master of the works, died, and for about 30 years, nothing was done, or practically nothing was done. Then in 1331, they decided to appoint a new master of the works, which was Giotto. And Giotto designed the Campanile, and he lived just long enough for the first floor to be erected and some of the panels put in. And the Campanile is a very interesting building because it records the medieval view of history and the works of the human race. The on the lower courses, you'll see some hexagonal panels, and on the above courses, you'll see these diamond-shaped panels. Most of them were made by Andrea Pisano and his workshop, and some of them, very few, were made by Luca della Robbia and his workshop. And they were to describe the history of mankind according to the Bible. So there were each section, there are 7 panels on each side for the hexagonals, and 7 panels for the lozenge-shaped panels. And what they do is not only do they show history, but they also show all of the trades that were shown in the Bible and all of the trades currently in operation during the Middle Ages, as well as some philosophical concepts that were leading intellectual ideas of that time. So this is a virtual encyclopedia of the thought of the late Middle Ages.
So the higher levels of the Campanile, was that Giotto's design, or were those higher panels designed by other the niches
After
and so
Giotto
on?
died, 3 or 4 years after he began the project, this also fell into some abeyance, but then it was taken over by Francesco Talenti, who also increased the size of the cathedral, but also finished off the design and the execution of the Campanile.
According to Giotto's original
According to
design?
Giotto's design, except the fact that the top 3 floors were gradually lengthened with respect to each other and made a little wider with respect to each other so that they wouldn't look distorted when you looked upright from the door.
I see.
Okay, so, and you can see above, there in each one of the niches above, there were 16 images of prophets and patriarchs of the church. This is from one of the niches. This is by Pisano. It's of King David. You can see it's in that transition period. The hands aren't completely at the side. There is some facial characteristic to it. And you can see why these things were taken down. Because over the centuries, there was a lot of pollution. And individually, they were taken down, and the works of the Duomo continued to produce copies, and it still does. So then, so that as each one of these statues became removed from its niche, they would be able to put up a replacement.
I see.
And this is one of the niches, one of the famous ones by Donatello, where you can see a complete change in sculpture during the Renaissance. This is 100 years after Pisano. You can see the church and the Campanile took over 150 years to complete, and in fact, it wasn't even completed after the 150 years. But you can see this is Habakkuk, one of the prophets from the Old Testament. you can see that he appears with a very fierce visage, something which Donatello is very famous for, trying to show the emotion not merely through the attitude of the body, but also in the face, and in the shape of the draperies, which you can see is this whirling shape, which sort of echoes his disturbance, because he's talking about the destruction of Israel, which all of the old prophets seem to talk about. And it's just recently been cleaned. So although it's been scarred over the centuries by pollution, it still has this incredible power to move you.
Now, what do you mean by pollution? Do you mean soot from the fires?
No, actually, these are outside. These stood on the outside, and for hundreds of years there were wood fires, coal fires,
Yeah, right.
automobile. Eventually, automobile smoke from the train station.
Now, before we go, Ellen, can you tell us how much more time we have? Because I have some favorites that I want
Okay.
to get to. I want to get to
About 12 more minutes.
12 more minutes. Okay, let me just do one quick thing quickly.
10 more minutes.
I just want to see where we are. Oh my goodness, we're only on 21 of 42.
Well,
Oh well, we could extend it into another
sure, if you wish.
show. We could do that.
Sure.
Well, I don't want to rush it.
Well-
So maybe we could just hold off and maybe save those. You know what I'm referring to,
Yes.
the ones. So maybe we
Yeah.
could just take our time. We only have 12 minutes, so let's just go at your own pace.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is another great example by Donatello. This is Jeremiah from the same period. You'll notice that the posture is very similar to the Habakkuk. His arm is at the side, the shoulder is flung back. But
Wait a minute, I have to do something because I got to get rid of that bottom thing there. And I think the reason it was there because of this. Could it be this? Or is that going to stay there? I can't get rid of that.
okay.
There it goes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So you'll see this statue has also just been cleaned. Okay.
Okay.
And there's an example. These are the originals. Two of them you can see are cleaned. One by one, they're restored.
So the ones on the bottom left are the ones that are clean.
Restored, yeah, and the rest are not. And there are many more in this particular room. So they're very charming. They're small and mostly done by workshop people from the Pisanos and the Della Robbias. So they're not quite as finished as the master of the shop.
Okay.
And here's a close-up
Close-up.
of one of them by Pisano. This is the birth of Eve from Adam's rib, and you can see it's still this sort of Renaissance, pre-Renaissance Gothic schematism, but it tells a little story in this sort of comic book form. The trees are very comic book. The people are very comic book, but it was designed so that it could be seen from below
And tell a story.
and tell the story.
And the parishioners understood all this. They knew all this.
Yeah, because
And they were able to look at this and relate it to what they would, be kind of learning from the priest or learning from the Bible.
exactly. I would say majority of the people would probably understand all of this because church attendance was almost a requirement, as a matter of fact. And that's what many of the sermons were about.
Mm-hmm. So they knew their Bible.
Yep. And this is also a picture of a sculptor at work by Pisano. And you can see the sculptor is sitting down working on a small piece, sort of has it angled up, and he has his hammer and chisel. And in the background, behind the sculptor, is the drill, the sort of bow drill that they used to use. And at the bottom, near his feet, is the picciarello, the pickaxe that they would use for carving.
Was this part of a set of maybe, artisans?
Yes, this was part of that whole program about the arts of civilization. It went from everything from the sculptor, the blacksmith, the farmer, to the philosopher, the teacher, the geometer.
Right.
So it covered every major trade and intellectual activity, so as to cover virtually in an encyclopedic way every single aspect of society. And this is the Baptistery, which was begun in the 1100s.
Let's make that bigger.
This is the Baptistery of St. John the Baptist. It's essentially was begun way before the cathedral. It's octagonal. It probably stands or may stand over another a Roman temple. On the other hand, it may stand over just a Roman domus, a house. Most of the interior artwork has been removed, including the giant laver, which was or stoop, which was the baptismal stoop that was on the inside of, and most of the artworks are now preserved in the Duomo.
Now, is that one of the parts of the presentation, the competition doors?
No, this was
Are the competition doors in the?
Yes, pardon me. The
Are you going to be doing that?
Yeah, the competition doors are on the east side of the
Right.
And
So coming up, for my own purposes, we have the competition doors.
right,
We have the Donatello Mary Magdalene,
right,
and we have the Michelangelo deposition.
correct.
So we could stop it
Okay.
and continue because those are three major
Yes, they are.
things.
They're probably the major pieces of Renaissance or late Renaissance and Mannerist art
Yeah.
in Florence.
Maybe this is a good time to stop. Is this okay to stop at this time? Yeah, we could stop, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to go for 5 more?
Well, you have the outro.
Yeah. Okay. I think we could stop, and then we'll pick it up again at this point
Sure.
and talk about the competition doors and the other items that I mentioned
Sure.
earlier. So this is a good time to stop, and we'll pick it up again the next time. And
Okay.
instead of doing Marino Marini, we'll do the second half of the Duomo.
Okay.
This is wonderful.
Sounds good.
So, thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure, and as we indicated, we're going to be picking this up again in the future. So probably in a few weeks. I forgot the date, but you probably know better than I. Sometime in October, I suppose. We'll be picking it up with the Museo dell'Opera del Duomo, Part 2. Until then, buonanotte e buona fortuna.